Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Christ Church Live. I'm your host, Father Michael Tennant, Interim Rector at Christ Church, Coronado. And today I have the great privilege to interview the Right Reverend Susan Brown Snook, our bishop, the bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of San Diego. You know her well. And Susan, welcome, Bishop. It's good to have you today. It's a joy to be with you as always and discover how you're doing as bishop of this great diocese. Pretty sure that your days are probably very long and filled with a lot of daily challenges. So I know you're engaged on many levels of leadership in the wider church and the diocese and local communities. So let me ask you first, how are you feeling? How are you doing these days? How are you holding up?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's a great pleasure to be with you and
Thank you.
to bring greetings to the people of Christ Church Coronado and all others who may be listening. And it's a pleasure to be talking with my friend Father Mike Tinnen,
Oh,
and
thank you.
someone whose ministry I really respect and appreciate. And
Thank
so
you.
I'm very glad to be with you.
Yeah.
So your question, how am I doing? How am I holding up? Well, this last few months of being a bishop was nothing like I expected my first to be. It's been very different, very challenging, full of ways of acting that I didn't expect.
Sure.
The first 6 months or so that I was the bishop, I spent lots of time out on the road and meeting with people personally, and of course visiting congregations and enjoying meeting the people and developing relationships.
Right.
Now everything is online. In my house involves quite a few decisions that I never thought I'd have to make. Involves becoming expert on subjects I never thought would ever be an area of concern for me. Um, and so it's been one surprise after another. But
Yeah.
I'm grateful for the people I work with, for the great clergy and lay leaders of this diocese, for my staff, for my family that are great support. And I'm holding up pretty well. It's just a very different ministry from what I thought it would be.
Sure. I know it's, as you look at the big picture, you know, a lot of things have been thrown on your plate that no one would anticipate in a new position of leadership. And I remember in the military, one of the great sayings was flexibility is the key to air power. You know, flexibility, being able to flex at a moment's notice, and you do that very well, really. I mean, that's one of your real gifts. And I know it's hard because you have so many demands coming at you from different directions, not just the wider church, but especially on our diocese. I don't know if many people know what a typical day in your life might look like. And I know it's pretty fluid. It changes quite a bit, dynamic. Can you kind of give us a little glimpse of what a typical day might be like for you?
Well, I guess that depends on whether we're talking about during COVID time or during ordinary
Sure.
time. But either way, whether almost all of my interactions are online or whether they're in person or various ways, a typical day for me involves a whole lot of meeting and talking with different people. So, I'll have a meeting of the finance committee, or I'll have a sit down meeting with a rector of a congregation who might be discerning new directions in ministry, or might have a particular question about something going on in his or her congregation, or and then I'll have perhaps a meeting with a group of people from the wider church, a group of bishops or others, um, or I'll have a kind of a visioning meeting with our strategic planning group, or with some of our staff who really are trying to think about the future and how do we develop the church in a new way. So it's a ministry that involves everything from sort of difficult decisions about what to do about a problem to a real ability to try to vision what the church is called to become in the next 10 or 12 or 20 or 50 years, and try to position ourselves ourselves to be able to do what we think God is calling us to do. So
Yeah.
there's a little bit of everything, and it's a whole lot of meeting with people. And what I have a challenge with is scheduling time to answer my emails and look at my mail and and talk on the phone, and
Yeah.
that's the hard thing.
Yeah, usually everyone wants a piece of your time, and that's why I'm so grateful that you're doing this interview today. I know how busy your schedule.
Oh,
Know
well, this
how,
is a pleasure. This is what I
uh,
love to do, is talk to people. So,
no, it's good. I was thinking about how the dynamics change, of course, every day, week to week. As you're entrenched in this new ministry. What are a few of the critical issues on your radar right now that you consider of very critical importance, paramount importance?
well, I have things that are the priorities I brought into this ministry, and I have things that have come upon us unexpectedly. I'll start by talking about the things that have presented themselves as issues.
Mm-hmm.
And clearly, the top one at the moment is the issue of the pandemic and how that affects our churches. And so we were, of course, closed for in-person worship for a period of time. We opened briefly and then closed again because of the increasing numbers here in Southern California and in our diocese. We have, very troubling numbers in Yuma and in Imperial County, Riverside County also, and
Right.
San Diego County is not too far behind. We are currently at a place where our daily number of new cases are 3 to 4 times higher
Mm-hmm.
than when we originally reopened for in-person worship. And so this is the kind of issue that I did not expect to have to become an expert on. I don't know anything about epidemiology or public health, so I have to bring in advisors to help me
Sure.
think through those things,
Sure.
both scientists, health experts, and other clergy and other people through the diocese to help me think through what kind of decisions we have to make. And so the decisions related to the pandemic are not only about in-person worship, that's the
Mm-hmm.
thing that's most obvious to people, but it's really underneath that. What is the mission of the church? And I think for many of us in our churches over the years, we've become accustomed to thinking of worship as our primary place of mission. It's our
Mm-hmm.
primary way of attracting people in, and it's the focus of how we bring people together. And I think maybe there's a gift in this time that asks us to think about what is our mission outside of in-person worship. How are we called in this time of all times to reach out to people in our community and make a difference to our community when so many people are suffering in different ways, economically, physically, and so forth, and maybe
Sure.
just loneliness, isolation? How are we as a church called to bring a message of hope and love and new mission into a time in a community that is suffering in those ways? So that's the first issue that's really on our mind. The second one, of course, is over the last month or so, the issue of racism has
Mm-hmm.
again come to the attention of our country
Yeah.
after some troubling events. And so I'm trying to figure out how we as a church are called to respond. So, and of course, I'm a white person, I'm a member of the dominant group. So, excuse me. Sorry.
Yeah.
um, a big part of my response to that has to be learning about the issue personally and about how I, as a white person, might have benefited from racism in ways that I wasn't aware of, and maybe didn't realize that I had certain kinds of privilege and so forth. And so, learning is the first part of it. And a number of our communities are entering into Sacred Ground and other kind of programs to help learn about the issue of racism and how it's affected us. Also, I think that our congregations, our diocese, are called to take action in response to the issue of racism. So last week we launched an anti-racism covenant that invites people to explore things that we need to change as a church, and particular action steps that we can do. So that is on our website if anybody would like to see it. I've also been working with other interfaith leaders in the community and leaders across the Episcopal Church to work together to form a kind of a community response to that. So that's been a big part of my focus recently. Of course, there's a lot of economic suffering going on as related to the pandemic and the associated, whether it's a recession or I don't know what it would be called, but a lot of people are out of work and suffering. And so we've done some fundraising to help people. We are giving grants to people who are suffering. And I'm hoping that now that we have some money to do some things, that congregations will create programs to help people in their communities, and will apply for some of the funding that we have. Many have already, and I'm hoping for more of that. Underneath all that, my real passion that I brought into this ministry is a passion for evangelism and growing churches. And so that's really at the basis of everything for me, is how do we discern our mission as a congregation, as each congregation, related to the wider community that it's located in, to the people and the particular gifts that are within the congregation. How can we take our message of Jesus's love and God's salvation, God's hope for reconciliation for the whole world, out to our communities and proclaim that good news, because I know that we have good news to share.
Sure.
So I think that my job as a bishop is to support our congregations in learning how to do that mission of proclaiming good news to our communities, and support them with the tools that they need to be able to do that.
Sure. Yeah, you know, as just looking, hindsight is much easier. If you could have looked ahead, you know, to what you were certainly getting yourself into. You know, I had a friend in ministry, and he went to a large church and had many moving parts, of course, as a large parish would. And about a year into it, he said, I don't know, I didn't realize what I was getting myself into, you know. But, you know, when the Lord calls you and you've been designated, you just sort of keep on keeping on, and you have to be flexible. And there's just, at any given moment, it seems like there's a different matter of critical importance on your radar that's elevated to your radar, you know, because of what's going on, and certainly the issue of racism. And I'm really proud of what we're doing in the diocese with that. And under your leadership, I saw the statement yesterday, and it was just marvelous. And I know that's going to be on the website. Is it on the website now, or?
It's on the website, and people have the opportunity to sign on. So we have a number of people who've already signed on, saying, you know, we support this covenant. We will take action steps based on it. So it is there.
Yeah. One of our parishioners saw that. He wasn't quite sure initially, you know, when he comes from back east, where there was always fractures of some kind as far as racism is related, you know, and he saw the statement, and he said, I really had to pray about it in my own heart and mind to look and see how I can be a part of it, to help, to pave the way forward, you know, for reconciliation and some kind of really hope for the future. It's really sad, you know, as we think about this issue now. I mean, this is the year 2020. I remember, I don't think I've ever shared this with you, when Becky and I were at a church in Alabama, you know, in Birmingham. And it was almost as if Martin Luther King never existed, you know, Selma never happened. Some of the same dynamics were prevalent then. And that was 1992, as they were when I was a kid growing up in Florida in the 1960s. And I still remember the pain of, you know, going downtown and getting on a bus, and it had coloreds to the rear, separate bathrooms, separate water fountains for whites and blacks, and, you know, and people of color. It was just amazing as a 7-year-old kid to experience that, having never really understood anything about racial tension. So I'm glad that, you know, the Episcopal Church is at the forefront of this, and and always has been, really. So I applaud you and your team, Brenda Soul, and all the colleagues that drafted the first statement. Really wonderful words. And now we have to, as you said, live those out, and find ways to be creative in our interactions with our brothers and sisters in Christ. So, well, I was looking at the calendar, and you were consecrated fifth bishop in June of 2019. So just a little over a year ago. What would you say has been the most enlightening revelation in your first year as bishop?
What's been interesting to me is that people here in the Diocese of San Diego seem to be truly hungry for growth and transformation. So I came in talking about what I believe are the three pillars of mission of the church, which are discipleship. Everything is based on discipleship, which is how we follow Jesus and how we develop our own following of Jesus through prayer and worship and spiritual practices and learning and so forth. So that's the basis of everything. And then once we've done that internal work of following Jesus, then I believe the love spills out of us and we begin to share that with the outside world. And so that happens in two ways, in both evangelism, which is sharing that good news with other people, and service, how we serve our communities. And I found that as I've talked about those things, people are really hungry for hearing words of hope for the church. Like, I really believe that our church has so much to offer this world, and I think people want to hear that
Sure.
word of hope. That there's a really important mission for our church here and now,
Yeah.
and so we don't always know how to articulate that good news, the good news of why Jesus makes a difference in the world today, or what it is that people find in our churches to help them connect to that good news. But people really want to learn and grow. They want to see their churches thrive, and it's been really so rewarding to feel like I've been working with a team of people that is passionate about sharing the gospel through both proclamation and service with their wider communities, and that we together just need to discover how to do that in each place.
Sure.
So yeah, that's been really exciting for me.
Yeah, it's certainly enlightening in many respects. We discussed already, I mean, the deadly effects of the coronavirus and racial tension, and how it's certainly couldn't have helped but influence your role, impact your role as bishop. A lot of your energy and attention is directed at those two venues these days, of what's going on, how do we respond, how do we move forward, in the love of Christ. As you look to the future, I know you have shared this many times, you have a vision of what you'd like to see happen on the Diocese of San Diego, and how you're moving forward with that. Have these issues kind of superseded what you'd really like to accomplish? Have they really just brought the train to a halt, a screeching halt, as you look to the future, or are you able to kind of manipulate around the sidelines and do an end run and come up with other ways to move forward?
Well, the interesting thing is that no, things have not come to a screeching halt at all. In fact, beginning last summer, we started a strategic planning process, which sounds very businessy and so forth. But the strategic planning group that is working on the vision for our diocese for the next 5 or so years has focused on really the exact kind of issues that I think that we need to be looking at. So we have 7 areas that are going to be areas of priority for us. So those are, hopefully I can remember them: discipleship, evangelism, church growth, leadership, stewardship, service, and advocacy. So
Good for
there,
you.
I remembered them all. That's
That's good.
and so the interesting thing is that there's been really good passion and agreement develop around those areas, and really good kind of initiatives dreamed up. And what I've found is, yes, the pandemic has affected some of what we're able to do, obviously, but it's also highlighted areas, I guess, where we have opportunities for church growth and development. It's allowed people, for instance, um, to say, well, if we're not going to be worshiping in person, how shall we work on developing discipleship in our congregation? You've seen just kind of an explosion of daily prayer and other kind of Bible study and spiritual offerings online. So that's just kind of happened
Yeah.
organically, in addition to what we've been providing at the diocesan level.
Mhm.
And in some ways, we've also had highlighted, particular communities that are sort of ripe for evangelism and
Mhm.
church growth and congregational development. And so, in some ways where it doesn't look like much is happening on the surface, there is a whole lot bubbling up underneath.
Sure.
So I think we've had kind of a surface quiet period, but that's been a time for a real energy
Yeah.
to begin growing, for the Holy Spirit to be working with us to help us launch the new, whatever the new era in the church is going to call us to.
Sure. Yeah, it's quite remarkable when you think about if there was good that came out of COVID. Most of the churches basically operated in the same function and fashion. We have a service at 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock. If you want to be a part of us, that's when you come. And I've often thought in my own heart, and kind of used this as an example, that if you had two Episcopal churches across the street from each other, and one offered one service at 10 a.m. and the other church had all kinds of options, most people are going to gravitate toward the options. And I think the world of Zoom has sort of opened that up for us. We actually have people worshiping with us from all over the country. In
Mhm.
fact, our men's Bible study the other day, some guy got on Google, did a search for men's Bible study and came up with Christ Church Coronado. And he lives in I think, Maryland or somewhere on the East Coast. And everybody was just astounded that this happened. And now he's, I think, a part of the group and doing well. And so, I mean, the world of Zoom has certainly offered us some opportunities that we're able to capitalize on now that we really didn't before. And maybe we were forced to do that. What doors to ministry have been open, do you think, as a result of this virtual capability?
Well, that's certainly one of them. One of a rector of one of the congregations was telling me, yes, they've seen their views expand greatly, and so
Mm-hmm.
there are people joining their worship from uh, all over the country. And what it's done in particular, um, it, it, I haven't heard. I haven't really heard other stories like what you just related, that a person just found it on Google and joined. But what they've found is that this Zoom capability has allowed, family members. So, for instance, you have grandma and grandpa who are devoted to the church and show up
Mm-hmm.
every Sunday and so forth, and their children have had their children baptized in the church, but they don't actually show up very often.
Right.
And the children don't necessarily go to Sunday school on a regular basis at all. But the Zoom kind of virtual worship environment has allowed them to join more often because they've had such busy schedules. It's hard for them
Mm-hmm.
to show up, but they will. So these people who are sort of marginally connected to the church have become more in-depth connected
Right.
because we have made it more available to them,
Mm-hmm.
their children. You probably remember as much as I do. It's hard to get out of the door with a group of children on a Sunday morning, and sometimes you think, I've done this every day this week. Can we just not for once? And so the online environment makes that more possible, so
Yeah.
that some people are seeing more young families joining and
Sure.
communities developing that way.
Yeah.
So anyway, there are lots of opportunities, I think, and I would not be surprised if even, a year from now, if we're all back to in-person worship and everything's fine, um, that I think that we'll continue those virtual environments
Yeah.
because we do reach more people that way.
Sure. Yeah, I know our church is really at Christ Church. They've really been enlightened by the capability, and we have quite a few elderly, and it's kind of hard to get up at any particular time and get moving, to get to church. And now they're just becoming gurus with iPad and computers, and we're helping them. So it's really been a blessing to them because they certainly enjoy it. Although it's not, it's certainly not the same as being an in-person, but. And I guess that leads me to my next question, which is kind of a volatile question, but it's certainly a topic of conversation that is on the minds and hearts of everyone on the diocese. Is the question of if or when will churches be able to return to in-person worship? I know you're looking at that very closely. We were able to open for a short period of time, and then the numbers started to spike again. And, just before we ask the question, I really want to applaud your leadership in that area because you made a decision and you went with it, and sometimes we make decisions that people don't like, and that's why I guess they pay certain people the big bucks, to make those kind of decisions. But it's not something you relish doing, and a decision that you make will probably please a lot of people but alienate others. But Bishop Susan, you made it with integrity, and you did a wonderful job from your heart and compassion to move forward with that decision. So now we look at it again. What do you think? What's on the horizon, do you think, for churches now in the diocese?
Well, the difficult part about that question is we don't have a schedule. We don't know what the virus is going to do. I am watching the numbers very closely in all 4 of our counties. And even within each county, like for instance, San Diego County, where the preponderance of our churches are, has a big difference in the incidence of the virus from north, which is a lighter incidence, all the way down to the south, which has a much higher incidence, rivaling, the kind of things we're seeing in Arizona.
Right.
And so one of the questions I have to ask myself is, given the fact that the places where the incidence of the virus is higher tend to be more diverse, less high income populations, would it make sense to open the places where there's less virus, knowing that those tend to be the more affluent, less diverse congregations? And I have to think through issues of justice and fairness and so forth. So to be honest, this situation changes so much every day that I put a high value on clarity. Like in an ideal world, I'd be able to say, here are the dates and here is exactly what's going to happen. And yet the thing changes every day and I don't know. And so all I can say is I'll be looking really closely at the incidence of the disease in various regions. I'll be considering questions of justice and fairness, but also considering, what is the best for the mission of our church? What can we do that is safe? And how can we do that in a way that supports the mission of the church without contributing to the incidence of disease in the community? Because, people said to me, I come to worship, I'm taking my own risks. Well, yes, but you're also taking a risk for everyone else you might come into contact with. So it's more than a personal choice. It's also a question of how we are taking action on behalf of our community.
Right.
And so I do that with a whole lot of advice from a whole lot of people and a whole lot of prayer. And I'll tell you, this is not easy. It isn't easy. It's, as I said, it's not something I ever expected to have to do.
And I think it gets more difficult as each day passes, the longer we're entrenched in this pandemic. One of the things I really want to highlight is, and I think most people know it, but just in case they don't, I'm going to highlight it anyway. Uh, as bishop, I don't know too many bishops that could have been consecrated. There's been a few, in a year's time, face all the challenges that you faced and done it with integrity and love and service and compassion. And all of those things matter to people on the diocese. I mean, I'm sure everybody can't see it, but hopefully we'll broadcast this interview so they can see it and see what kind of heart you have. I know it's put a dampener on being able to do visitation in person at churches and be engaged with them. One thing I've really appreciated about you, and I've talked to other clergy about it, is even though you're the bishop, you're very collaborative in your leadership style, and you really want to hear other people's opinions and their inputs and their thoughts and processes. And then you weigh all of those and you make a decision. I think that's very admirable. I think that's one of your great gifts as bishop. As you look now at today, we don't know what tomorrow is going to hold. We just don't. But I want to commend your staff, Bishop Susan. You have a wonderful staff. I mean, I have got to know them, Karen and Kirby, and I think you could search the world over and not find a better canon to the ordinary than Gwen. The staff members that you have, that you surround yourself with, Christian, Chris, unbelievable people. And I don't want to leave anybody out, I will, but I just want you to know that you have a fantastic staff and they just serve in ways that go above and beyond the call of duty. So thank you for the staff that you put into place. They're making a difference on the diocese. They're so friendly and warm and willing to help all of us who don't have any answers, So it's not all coming from you. I'm sure it does, but you've kind of pushed that down to them and allowed them to speak on your behalf in certain arenas, So thank you.
Yeah, I'm really happy with the staff, and I can't let that go without giving a shout out to Charlotte, who's
Yeah.
your youth director there at Christchurch Coronado, but also our diocesan youth minister. And man, is she amazing. She is just amazing. So shout out to Charlotte, who thank goodness for her at Christchurch and at the diocese.
Yeah, Deacon Tom and I are not techno savvy, so Charlotte's always filling in the pieces for us. She's really remarkable and amazing and has the right heart. She's such a blessing to Christchurch, so we're fortunate to have her. Mm-hmm. Well, Bishop Susan, it's been a privilege, a blessing to be with you today. I know I speak for many. We're just extremely grateful and indebted for your dynamic leadership. I believe the Diocese of San Diego is in wonderful shape, has a wonderful future with you at the helm, and I applaud your visionary leadership. I think everybody's benefiting from your leadership, so I don't want you to ever think that you're not doing a wonderful job, because you are. Everybody I talk to just brags on you. Our people at Christchurch love you and appreciate you, and I know that's consistent across the diocese. I want you to know that we pledge our continued prayers and support for you in this critical time in our nation's history, and we're at your disposal. Whatever you need, you call on me anytime. I'm honored to serve at your disposal. I just consider you a dear friend and a wonderful leader. So thanks for everything. Thanks for what you're doing and what you're going to do and how the Lord is going to use you. So blessings to you.
Well, thank you, Mike, and blessings to you too. And I've really appreciated our friendship, and I really appreciate all that you've done in our diocese. I've been able to see you as the interim rector at St. David's and now at Christchurch, and you've done really great work at both of those places. And I'm just really honored to be able to call you a friend.
You as well. Thank you so much. I know your day's busy, but call me anytime.
Well, thank you so much.
All right. Have a wonderful day. Blessings.
And you.